It wouldn't be a vacation if I didn't miss somebody back at home. It wouldn't be a vacation if I didn't feel like...
That was Vacation by Ice Cream Orphan. I'm Dakota Antelman, and this is 3 Pounds of Pure Culture, the podcast where I take you in-depth into local and hyper-local music that gets its life in the smallest of venues, from here in Hudson, Massachusetts, to Boston. We featured our first solo act last episode with Maggie Del Rey. Today, we spotlight a hybrid of sorts. This episode, it's Ice Cream Orphan, an eclectic indie punk folk pop project by Boston-based musician Cam Pulaski. They tour with a small band to bring their music to life, but make no mistake, Ice Cream Orphan and each of the 2 full-length albums and 1 EP that they've put out are the sole product of Pulaski's unique musical mind. We have an interview with Pulaski later on the show, but first, joining me live in the studio to break down their music is my friend and fellow music nerd, Buffy Catella, back for a second episode. Buffy, welcome to the broadcast.
Thanks for having me back. I know, it was so good last time.
Oh yeah, we crushed it there.
Yeah.
So, some background, Ice Cream Orphan is a now 3-year-old project by musician Cam Pulaski. Born in Pulaski's basement, the debut Ice Cream album grew over 5 months in 2016 before dropping on Bandcamp in July of that year. Between that release date and the next Ice Cream iteration, Pulaski added Eric Willett and Tyler D'Angelo Lombardi, pardon me if I'm butchering any of these names.
They're hard names.
They are hard names.
Keep going.
To their lineup, allowing them to bring their sound to local music venues in the Boston area and throughout the state of Connecticut in particular, where Pulaski now attends college. Even with that expanded lineup, Pulaski returned to their solitary recording habits, however, for their 2017 release, Things From My Mouth, as well as Athletes in My Closet, a 2018 EP released across multiple online music platforms. Today, Ice Cream Orphan continues to play frequent live shows, and all in all are just a musical force to be reckoned with in this kind of central Massachusetts, upper Connecticut music scene. Nevertheless, we're going to try to reckon with all of that right now. Buffy, listening through this catalog, what were your first impressions on them?
Okay. The first couple songs I listened to, I feel like they have a very much... I don't know why I get this Green Day vibe, but I get a Green Day vibe. Like early, like American Idiot Green Day. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how, I don't know, that's how I felt it at the beginning. But then, as I was jumping around listening to other things, that Green Day vibe kind of leaves and you get more of like a front bottoms type thing going on. So yeah, that's kind of my first impressions. I enjoyed it. I like their voice. Their voice is very good. Mm-hmm. Also very interesting that I had no idea that they were a college student. So yeah, that's even more impressive that they're touring and putting out music as a college student.
Yeah, this was a project that started when Cam was in high school.
Okay.
And they've been able to kind of keep it going while at college. Interesting you bring up the Green Day vibe, because when I talked, you're going to hear our interview with Cam later in the broadcast, but when I talked to them, they talked a lot about, kind of musical influences, and it wasn't necessarily that pop-punk influence. They talked about Blink and Green Day, that kind of pop-punk bands coming in later in high school. But it was a lot more kind of very early old school punk, Ramones, Clash, that kind of stuff that Cam said they listened to.
Really?
That coming together. So interesting that you heard that. For me, I definitely see that too, a little bit. Sort of the diversity, you go from a front bottoms-y kind of feel, to a more pop-punky sound.
Yeah.
I think that diversity really is kind of amazing in this band. Something you see when you dig through their Facebook page, you dig through all the stuff that's been put out online about this. When you look under genre on the Facebook page, Cam simply put the words idea rock under there. And I think that's fitting, because kind of aside from that, I have no idea how to categorize this sound.
I agree.
Yeah, it's
all over the place.
Oh, absolutely.
Not in a bad way. Like, I don't think that's bad at all. I think the diversity makes it even more interesting, because I think you can have like the hard pivots where sometimes I think you're right. It is kind of like this folky vibe, and then it goes to like full on. You get that like Green Day vibe into it. Sure. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, other bands I was hearing influencing, particularly in some of the older stuff.
Yeah.
You hear a Death Cab for Cutie, a car seat headrest vibe.
Yeah.
A similarity with those is those are 2 more kind of indie rock, alt rock outfits that grew out of solo projects.
Yeah.
You can hear that kind of simplistic origin But of course, as I said, you hear the old school punk, you hear the 90s rock.
Yep.
Obviously, as anyone who's been making rock music in the past 20 years, you hear the Nirvana, you hear the grunge influence, but all of that. Of course, we do hit the peak rock feel on that most recent EP,
I agree.
Athletes in My Closet.
Yep.
The first 2 albums were a little more kind of acoustic feeling. But even within those, there's a lot of lyrical diversity. We talk about instrumental diversity and kind of sounding like a Green Day, versus a Front Bottoms. But lyrical diversity, you have these very kind of idea-focused songs versus a narrative song. You hear us talking about that in our interview later. But you also hear, particularly in Athletes in My Closet, Cam suddenly is talking about sex and romance in this very kind of blunt, no-holds-barred sort of way.
Yeah.
Again, you'll hear him. You'll hear Cam talk about that a little bit later too. But just kind of, there's a lot of range in so much. That's just brilliant.
I totally agree with that. That makes, and I think you're right. It is no holds bars for the newest album.
Yeah.
And I think that's good. A flexible band is always a good thing.
Oh, for sure.
And you show the range of what you can do. But yeah, I think that's totally true of how the earlier stuff is much more different than what they're putting out now. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing. Like I said,
sure, yeah.
I just was very surprised while I was listening, because I listened to everything. I listened to all the EPs and all the albums, and I was just kind of astonished because weirdly enough, I was like cleaning my house. And I was like, wow, this is like really just, it sounds like multiple different bands.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so that's my view.
Well, and there are some good bands that have gone through and done that.
Yeah.
Some for better or worse. Some, obviously you hear music fans always griping about a band that gets suddenly poppier or something after, a rocky start.
Yeah.
That's a good example of it.
Coldplay.
Yeah, Maroon 5, Coldplay, those big bands. But interestingly, kind of when you listen to this Ice Cream Orphan discography, they get a less mainstream as they go on.
Yeah.
They start out with this kind of folky, chorus, verse, bridge vibe, on the first 2 albums. And then, of course, as you dig deeper into Athletes in My Closet, that EP, we keep talking about, it's just chaos by the end of the album. And it's beautiful and it's artful, but it's really straying, it's really pushing down. Pardon me. Hiccuping.
Boundaries. Pushing the boundaries.
It is, but it's certainly pushing boundaries, and I think that's what we need in modern music. That's what local music's great for. It's kind of creating new sounds, and I think Cam is doing a great job of that, obviously with the help of some of the other people helping bringing this to life live. But, so we've talked about a lot of music. 3 major releases that Cam's put out under the Ice Cream Orphan label. Of those, what would be your favorite song?
The song that I really enjoy is the first song, Vacation, that we played before the show, Vacation. I really enjoyed, when I heard that while I was cleaning, I was like, wow, like it's kind of like an emotional song. Like I kind of feel that way. Like I really connected to Cam and what they were putting out. It was very interesting to me. I enjoy songs that have a lot of raw emotion, and I feel like it's a very emotional song. So that one's really good. And I also was talking to you, I really like Boyfriend, because speaking of like hard pivots, 2 different, completely different songs, so different vibes. But when I first heard Boyfriend, I was like, what the heck is going on? I was so confused.
Yeah, Cam and I talk about that for a good probably 5 minutes in the interview, so stay tuned for that to hear the breakdown of that.
Yeah, I'm interested in exactly what they have to say about that. But those are probably my top 2, even though they're very different. I like a good range of things.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
For me, it's got to be Teenage Anthem, which is the opening track on Athletes in My Closet, and easily probably the hardest rocking track I think Cam has ever written. I compare them to the kind of subgenre of lo-fi one-man show, like Death Cab, Car Seat Headrest, throw Tame Impala in there a little bit.
Okay.
But this song, though, is where Ice Cream Orphan really sets itself apart and, displays some more range beyond that kind of strict lo-fi vibe. Teenage Anthem, just an epic rock song. You know, it starts slow with this kind of persistent, muted, electric guitar at the beginning, but then just explodes on the choruses as the song builds with these cymbals, these beautiful exploding choruses, and Cam just belting these lyrics. The song, as its name suggests, is kind of touching on very broadly, talking about a lot of stuff in adolescence. You talk about self-harm, experimentation with drugs, anxiety about being an adult. And perhaps fittingly, it is that latter topic that's kind of confined largely to the song's bridge. And I think, honestly, maybe the best minute of music I've heard in any of this stuff that Cam's put out on the internet. After one of those big loud choruses, Pulaski drops into that muted guitar strum that they kind of established early, and then quietly build with their vocals this kind of metaphor that equates adulthood to ordering fast food, with lines like, "I'll take a medium-sized children and wife." This metaphor is just an emotional dagger to the heart of the listener, and we really hope you guys listen to that. We're going to play that in just a few moments, but we really hope you listen to that. And then, of course, if that wasn't a big enough dagger, the song, spoiler alert here, the song ends with this just absolutely heartbreaking line, "I can't believe how bad I want to die," and then just fades out.
Yeah.
We talk about the blunt songwriting, the direct, Cam does not beat around the bush in the lyrics they come up with. And this song is just amazing. It had me speechless when I first heard it, and we're glad to give everyone the chance to hear it too. A brilliant song there.
Yeah, and my opinion on it is I definitely had the same feelings, because you had told me beforehand that was your favorite song. So I was like, ooh, I can't wait to hear this one song, because Dakota likes it, so it must be good. And I put it on, and I was like, I can see why Dakota likes it. I can totally see why. I was like, of course this is Dakota's favorite song, because I feel like it's very relatable to your life, at least. At some points. Yeah. Not the whole song, but not the whole song. Some of it, I feel like Dakota connects to, and I do too. I definitely feel some of the same feelings that Cam was saying. Also, I agree. Some really good songwriting, and I was just shocked. And now, like I said, now that I found out that Cam's a college student, it makes a lot more sense, because I really thought it was like some late 20s person putting this out, and I was thinking to myself, that's very interesting that this person in their late 20s is talking about being a teenager. But now I'm like, oh wait, no, it's just a college kid, so that makes sense. So
I mean, it's we keep bringing in these young bands on this podcast. We start with Color Killer, which is an extreme. Those kids are in middle school. We had Circus Trees a little while ago. We had Maggie Del Rey in the last episode, who is just a senior in high school. You have Cam, a little older here, but some of the best local music is being done by young people our age, a little older than us. And it's so great to spotlight that. Another thing we do want to point out, we've been using the they pronoun throughout this podcast episode. Cam identifies as non-binary, uses they pronouns, and something I just wanted to shed light on. The music industry needs more queer voices, and it is brilliant to have a good representative making fantastic music. Speaking, very proudly being proud about that. We love that in Cam's music.
Super cool. Yeah. I don't really know how to add to that, but I think you covered it all. I agree.
No, just certainly deserved a shout out. But we're going to wrap this up, this conversation back and forth with Buffy and I, and in just a minute we're going to play our interview with Cam Pulaski of Ice Cream Orphan. But first, thanks Buffy for stopping by.
Thanks, Dakota. You're the best. I hope you have me on again.
Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure you will be back.
Oh, cool. I like coming back here.
And to lead into that interview, we're going to play that song I gushed so loudly about. It's Teenage Anthem of I Have Athletes in My Closet. When we come back, we'll be one-on-one with Cam Pulaski of Ice Cream Orphan. Stay tuned.
I hope this town downward spiral starts to climb back up. Drop me when I'm a child. Now the future sucks. My friend has scars on her skin, and I don't know what to do. Now the scars on her head are showing too. I wonder where it all went wrong. Have we been living for too long? It's a mystery how we're not lying down, soaked in our own tears. It looks like it's all downhill from here. I got high for the first time with some friends I love. I don't know why I did it, but one time is enough. That's what I thought I would think when I woke in the morning. Now I'm thinking next weekend I might do it again. I wonder where it all went wrong. Have we been living for too long? It's a mystery how we're not lying down, soaked in our own tears. It looks like it's all downhill from here. Are we just boring? Have we done all that there is to do in life? I'll take a medium-sized children and wife, and to drink I'll have a crying every night, with a side of getting tired of the fights, and some extra I don't think my kid's alright. I can't believe how bad I wanna die. I wonder where it all went wrong. Have we been living for too long? It's a mystery how we're not lying down, soaked in our own tears. It looks like it's all downhill. It looks like it's all downhill. It looks like it's all downhill from here.
So I guess if we start right, getting into questions now. But how'd you get into music in the first place?
I got into music really, really young. I think I know as a kid I really liked Lenny Kravitz and Van Halen, but I think like the first music memory I have about something specifically was playing Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4. And like that has a lot of great music in the soundtrack, and it's mostly pop, punk, and hip hop. But what got me was the intro had TNT by AC/DC. And I think that got me, that, and then shortly after Guitar Hero got me super into music. And I think I started playing guitar before I played Guitar Hero, but I think that ended up giving me an appreciation for rock music, which was sort of most of what I listened to up until middle school.
Mm-hmm. So that's some pretty straight up classic rock.
100%, yeah.
Van Halen, Lenny Kravitz, AC/DC there. Would you categorize the music you've, made yourself as rock, or is that, something that you've sort of derived from that kind of classic rock introduction to music?
I think some of it's definitely rock. I think that's a pretty... it's a pretty general term at this point, but I think that I usually end up going with alternative. Sort of makes the most sense to me because that ends up having a bit of more of it includes a lot more than just like really hard rock.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, no, definitely in the vein of rock, that would make sense to me.
I feel that. And the pop punk influence is definitely something that I certainly hear listening to your stuff. But any specific within the pop punk genre or the punk genre that you particularly love?
Definitely leaning more towards punk. I probably didn't even get into something like Blink-182 until middle of high school. But I was super into Descendants when I was starting in middle school. Yeah, I saw them over the summer for the first time, and that was very cool. But yeah, I would say more in the punk vein, more so than pop punk. And I definitely liked stuff like Dead Kennedys is one of my favorites. Like Minor Threat's great. I'm trying to think. I don't know. I definitely haven't been that was definitely more something that I was into when I was younger, but I think I definitely still listen to Dead Kennedys a lot. Mm-hmm. And a bunch of other stuff. There's probably way more that I'm forgetting.
I feel that for sure.
Yeah.
And so, I think if we, how do you get to the point where, you talked about getting into music at a young age, you're playing Guitar Hero. You said you had started learning guitar before that. When did you start a band? I don't know if you were in a band before this current project, or when did it really start to kind of creating original content?
The first band I was ever in was this cover band I was in middle school, and I think I started trying to write songs a bit younger than that, but wasn't really confident in really trying it up until the beginning of high school, and like kind of trying to get a band together to do that. Because then the band I had right after that was a band that played mostly material that I had written. Mm-hmm. But that's pretty much the only band I had been in before starting on the Ice Cream Orphan project, which I pretty much did just so I could just put things out on my own and not really have to rely on other people to do so, or teach other people. I've played with other musicians under the Ice Cream Orphan name live, but as far as recordings go, there's very little collaboration, and especially when it gets to the songwriting, I'm writing pretty much everything. Mm-hmm. I think I've been in a few other bands recently, one or two that were more focused on collaboration, but I wasn't so much at the forefront. I was playing drums for those. And that was really interesting for me because I'd never done anything. I'd never done anything like that before, and that was just much different approach when it came to writing.
So that's something interesting. You shed light on the drumming aspect, and I think that's something where, listening to a lot of bands that kind of get their start, with this kind of one man show vibe of, I think Death Cab started that way. Who is it? Car Seat Headrest is another one. And those are bands that, you don't often see super intricate drums. the drums on some of your tracks are really, pretty complex, and you've tracks where the drums are all over them. Can you sort of talk about kind of the percussion aspect of your songwriting and your sound, and kind of where that weaves in?
Drums are definitely big, just because when I'm writing, I pretty much have a clear idea of what I want the drums to sound like. And I didn't really officially I never actually really took lessons for drums. I sort of started teaching myself at the beginning of high school when I got my first kit. And that's definitely become something I'm more interested in than playing guitar. It's basically drums and songwriting are the two things that ended up taking like precedent over other aspects of music that I'd sort of dabbled in. Like I had learned guitar for about probably 8 years up until that point, and kind of started to get more into rhythmic stuff. But yeah, when it comes to drums, like I don't really put too much thought into it. It's kind of just whatever feels the most natural to me. Like I write the song first before I don't even really write the drum part. I just kind of feel it out, and just whatever feels the most natural is what I end up putting down on it.
I feel that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I drum, so I totally get that. And that's something that I appreciate right off the bat of, wow, he's got some cool drums on these things.
Yeah. Hell yeah, definitely.
And so you mentioned kind of the start of the Ice Cream Orphan project. I'm sure you get this, question because it's a unique name, but where's the name come from?
Yeah, I've gotten people ask about this quite a bit. But it's a cool story. It's I went to this music camp when I was in like freshman year of high school. I went to this 3-week music camp, and at the end of that 3 weeks, like parents would come in and like see the kids perform like what they'd been working on those 3 weeks. It was kind of like a mostly jazz, classical type camp, but there were also like people could do rock ensembles. It was a lot. It was very cool. And traditionally, once the performances were done, the kids would get taken out for dinner by their parents. But there'd be some kids. We had a lot of like international, I don't know, not students, but like campers. We had international campers there, and like people whose parents couldn't make it. And what happened with those kids is they would end up getting taken on a bus to get ice cream all together. And so people kind of called them Ice Cream Orphans because like their parents didn't show up. Yeah, that's pretty much all where the name comes from.
That's a pretty fierce backstory. I like that.
Oh yeah, no, I love it a lot.
Yeah. And so talking then about, you start the project as a way to kind of release stuff on your own, kind of an unfiltered, version of your vision. You talked about, creating it all yourself. Your first release on Bandcamp, it says you made every sound on that album. Mm-hmm. What, kind of your first experience of recording stuff yourself like that and putting it out on the internet, what was that process like, getting to do it all yourself?
Like just the process of recording, like at first?
Well, yeah. Well, writing and recording, getting to produce something kind of 100% yourself and then put it out, with just your name, on it.
Yeah, it was definitely something, because I had been sort of doing little recordings on my own just since I was about 12 or so. I got this digital 8-track that I used a lot. And then by the time I had gotten to recording that, I had recently gotten Logic Pro and was starting to learn that a lot more. And that sort of ended up being like how I learned it, was recording that particular release. Like as far as writing went, like writing for me in general is not something I put too much thought into. I don't think I'm gonna write this or have a song about this. It's kind of just something that comes very naturally to me. Mm-hmm. I kind of just go about it as I'm going, and it was very much that way for doing that. It was a bunch of songs I had written and just wanted to record and put out there, so I did it.
I respect that.
Yeah, exactly. So there's not really much to say. It was definitely interesting because I'd never recorded that big of a project before. It was all kind of stuff just to have personal demos of. So there's definitely a bit more stress on me, and I think I probably spent more time on post-production stuff than I really needed to, but it's understandable because I just had never done anything like that before.
Yeah, for sure. Um, and I'm assuming you're doing these recordings at home. Have you ever recorded in a studio, or is this all done at home and in dorms and stuff?
Yeah, I've never done my own stuff at a studio. I'm currently going to a school for music production, so I've done recordings for other people, but pretty much everything that I've put out has been recorded in my parents' basement.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I've recently started doing recordings for other people that were also recorded there. But yeah, I've had a little bit of experience in like the studio on campus here, and I've done sort of like informal internships, but as far as like stuff that's been like 100% me, it's all been self-recorded.
So what impact does that have on your sound? Kind of the doing it on your own in your basement.
There's a lot of different versions of things. Just because I'm kind of a perfectionist, I've been trying to get it so I'm not doing that as much as I am, where I kind of just record things and let them be the way they are. But there ends up being like a few different versions of things. But that's also kind of nice to just be able to record whenever I want, however I want. I can take as much time on sort of getting things down, but also get an idea down right when I have that idea, which can give it a bit of a spark. But usually, like, with my last release, the EP, I actually had, like, I think 12 songs recorded, but I didn't really like any of the other ones, and I found that those 4 fit together the best, so I just put that out as an EP. So it's just like, I can record constantly, but it doesn't mean I have to release everything I record.
That's a really good philosophy. I like that.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And so you mentioned earlier how you've performed these these Ice Cream Orphan songs live with multiple different musicians. Bringing these things to life with other people as opposed to recording them all yourself, playing all the instruments yourself. Do you ever find that creates a difference? I guess how does your recorded work differ from sort of your live work?
It's definitely much different. I usually try and give the people I get for it, I try to give them as much freedom as I can. Like, obviously they can't just play the wrong part, but I like to let them kind of add their own little things to it, which ends up kind of giving it a much more free vibe. I've actually more recently, I've been trying to get back into solo performances, but with much fuller sounds. Like, I recently got this SB404 sampler that I've sort of been like reworking certain songs with and using a lot of vocal effects and having some drums in there. And that's gone kind of well, but already I'm kind of wanting to get back to acoustic instruments a bit more. So I've kind of been conceptualizing how I'm going to get a more acoustic sound on my own, but still have it be very full. But yeah, in the past, it's mostly been just like get friends together, have them learn the songs, and then just play them. Definitely like near the end of that whole era of it, of like more like band work, I guess, with the other people that were in it. It definitely ended up becoming much more free. Like, the songs were mostly the same, but a lot of the time in between, we didn't really let like any dead air hang there. So we would kind of just like improvise for like a little while, just like whether it be noise or some kind of little spur of the moment jam that leads into the next song.
Oh, that's awesome though. Yeah.
But yeah, I've definitely wanted to I definitely try and put as much as I can into it. I want to make it not really theatrical, but I want to make it like an experience that's different from what is expected to happen, because I feel like a lot of time, like, bands aren't expected to do much except play their songs, which is 100% fine, but I find the performances that I always find the most interesting, especially within a local scene, are ones that really just kind of go out there and just disregard all of that and just really just give people something different and really crazy.
Oh yeah, for sure, exactly. I totally feel that. So if we look at these, you talk about sort of kind of recording, not necessarily putting everything on an album, recording and, kind of constantly writing. When we look at what you have released, you kind of had three straight years, 2016 through 2018. We put out three straight records. How has your sort of music changed over these years as you've been working on this project?
I've definitely just gotten more comfortable with experimenting, even though it's not exactly, I wouldn't exactly call anything I do super experimental. I've definitely kind of gotten to where I'm more comfortable with just kind of doing whatever idea comes to my head and not disregarding things that I think will be too crazy or people won't like, or just like stuff like that. I've definitely just become more comfortable with like kind of trying to really push it as far as I can and get it out there. Like with more recent stuff that I've been writing, I don't really have like an album in mind. Like I imagine I'll end up releasing something at some point this year. I've found that recently I've kind of been working more towards creating like a sound rather than focusing on songwriting and structure too much, because I've been doing it for so long that it's kind of gotten to the point where just writing a regular like verse chorus type poppy rock song has just become almost boring and kind of easy, even though I think like a lot of the stuff I listen to does follow that and is really kind of a foolproof formula that can give way to some great music. But just I've been wanting to push it more in other directions that focus more on the instrumentals and the overall sound rather than the songwriting itself, because at this point I feel like I could kind of create any sort of sound and end up putting lyrics over it to create a song out of it. So I'd say it's definitely changed in that way. I've just kind of felt more comfortable stepping outside of what I'm comfortable with.
Yeah, well, that sounds awesome. When you do get stuff back published, I imagine that's going to sound really amazing.
I hope so.
In skimming through the Ice Cream Orphan Facebook page, I notice, I think in the genre section, we were talking about genre earlier, but you list in the genre section, your band is Idea Rock. What's sort of behind that?
I don't really remember. I think I was like, I have ideas, and they're in a rock vibe. I don't know why. I really don't know the thought behind it, but I said that. I think I thought that one day, like, because I didn't want to put like a regular genre in there. I wanted to put something, because it's kind of silly overall, just like the whole idea of social media presence and stuff, but it's necessary to some extent, and I definitely don't end up partaking in it as much as I probably should if I want to do more, but I kind of lost focus and really kind of trying to like play shows and like get my music out there. I'm kind of just at this point putting it out there, and then like whatever people want to do with it, they can do with it. But I think it's just like, these are just my ideas, and like it could be anything. It's just like the idea of it's like not so much defined by pre-existing genres, but by my own process and brain, I guess, and just like whatever it creates. So it's more like stuff that's just like me putting myself out there rather than me coming to like be labeled as a certain thing, I guess.
I love that. That's awesome. If only more musicians did that.
Maybe.
I know we've talked a lot about, and you were just talking about the, recently you've been focusing more on, instrumental sound. But I know you were also talking a little bit earlier about, kind of your experience songwriting and digging through kind of, the lyrics of the types of things you've written. I've noticed kind of you have a couple different paths. If you'll get really narrative, on something like Fell For It Again, you have some other songs that are really narrative, whereas you have something that's more overarching, less narrative focused, like the Teenage Anthem song. Do you have sort of a style that you see yourself gravitating towards more? Is there something you like writing more? Do you like those sort of narrative styles, or something more kind of overview based?
I really just kind of try everything. I've tried it. There's times where I want to be more personal about like what's going on and be really blunt and honest, and other times where I want to sort of tell I would definitely say I'm not so much. I don't feel like much of a storyteller. Like I'm not great at coming up with stories at all, really. Like it's more like when it's something narrative, like Fell for It Again, like you mentioned, it's more kind of like a sort of like idea or experience that I end up telling through way of a story, I guess. I feel like more recently I've kind of just been like, at least with my own experimentations, I've kind of just been like focusing more on the sounds of words and just like trying to create phrases that aren't normally said, but who knows if that'll end up being released, stuff like that. Yeah, no, it's definitely more fun. Like I said, I'm just trying to push things to, I guess, I want it to have clear experimentation within it, but I don't want it to go too far out because sometimes that can get a little too messy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting take. I totally get that. I mentioned Teenage Anthem there, and I mentioned it before. I certainly love that song. Digging into that a little bit, want to talk at all about how that song sort of came together for you? I know you say sometimes things sort of come to you. Kind of what's the backstory of that song?
That song, I'm trying to remember. I wrote that during my freshman year of college, and I think it was sparked by, in the first verse I mentioned, like how a friend has been self-harming or something. And that was like the first time I really had a close friend of mine who like stuff like that was happening. And it just kind of really stuck with me when I like found out that was happening. And I ended up kind of writing the song around it. I don't remember exactly what the rest of I think that was during my second semester, which was a really tough semester. But that was definitely the event that sort of spawned that song, was that whole idea. I think the first line might have come separately, but then like after that I was like, oh, this kind of feels like I'm talking about this a bit, so I might as well just say it.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
I dig that. Specifically, you get into this interesting metaphor kind of towards the end of that song. You kind of almost link it to a fast food restaurant.
Yeah.
Medium-sized children and wife. You kind of go on that tangent. Where's that come from?
I don't even remember. I think at that point, from what I can gather, I imagine I got to the bridge and kind of just maybe improvised something when I was first working on it. I kind of wanted to add a little bit of humor to it, I suppose, because like the rest of the song was such a bummer. I think I got to that point. I was like, I should put in something that's a little bit like, it's not really it's like a sad funny. It's like They Might Be Giants funny. Where it's like, yeah, exactly. I think that's how I was thinking. Like I don't, a lot of songwriting, I don't put too much thought into it, but I think that would be what was behind it.
Oh, for sure. And you put that song, first on the EP. I think there's a lot of different kind of schools of thought of how to structure, a release, but you open with kind of arguably one of the, loudest, rockiest things you've done, and put it first on that EP. Why put it where you put it?
I guess it just sounded like a good opening to me, but also I feel like in a way that was sort of the last song I wrote that felt like it was in the vein of songwriting that I was doing for the first two releases that I did. I remember when I wanted to put it there just because of the way it sounded, but I also thought about the fact that it sort of felt like I was sort of transitioning into a new, like, more unhinged style, just like kind of more, because like the rest of that, that's a kind of punkish song. It's a bit slower, but then the rest of that EP I felt had a bit more of like a punkish energy, which is why I ended up kind of putting those together. But I think it was that mostly. I kind of see it as a transition type song, and then also just the way it sounded, I thought it'd be a good opening with those opening chords and stuff.
Yeah.
And that release in general was just the first time I'd done something where every song kind of flows into one another.
Yeah, I was gonna say that album really, or that EP really has a lot of that.
Yeah, no, I'd wanted to do something like that for a while, and I since it was only 4 songs, it wasn't too hard to make it happen.
Yeah, I feel that. Um, yeah, you talk about sort of transitioning styles. You really sort of do build. That EP does sort of feel. You bring that up. That EP sort of feels like a bridge of sorts. If you start with Teenage Anthem, which does sound like some of the other two releases, and then you end with this unhinged, kind of out of control. I did it for art thing at the end.
Hmm.
That was specifically with I did it for art. What's sort of going on there, and was that kind of a conscious thought of like this is going to be kind of an introduction to how crazy and experimental I'm going here?
I think I just wanted to put something at the end because it was such a short song that I feel like at any other point in the EP it wouldn't have really made sense or just kind of like felt too crazy that you could never recover from it. So I figured I would just put that at the end. But it definitely does kind of build to like just like I feel like it almost in general, even though it is just a short release, I feel like it does build into just kind of chaos by the end of it.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I noticed a lot in that EP is lyrically, you're definitely stepping out from kind of the framework that you built with those first two releases, particularly on Boyfriend. You open with some quite direct language on that song.
That's correct.
And yeah, and I think that's certainly a style of you see people singing about sexuality and you see people singing about identity and stuff like that. And oftentimes they do it through metaphor. They try to, kind of gloss it up, and you seem, you really don't do that in that song. Why go so blunt and, just kind of put it all out there in that song?
I figured why not? I don't know. I figure with stuff like that, it's kind of easier. I shouldn't say it's easier. It's probably actually harder to be blunt and kind of overcome that. And there definitely was some thought about like that song in particular where I was like, this is like really blunt and out there and just like probably looks like I'm playing it for shock value. But like, I think it was just kind of a thing where I had been like watching a lot of like specific things that were kind of more I was kind of exploring online and finding a lot of like I guess I don't even know what to call them, just like kind of people who operate online or within politics who are just like more anti-gay, anti-trans rights, just like a lot of stuff that I disagree with. And so I think the two middle songs in particular kind of came from an anger at that, but I didn't want to approach it angry. I wanted to kind of make it humorous and really poppy and fun, just because like I felt like just kind of hitting it angry would be too easy to. Not that I thought any of these people would hear it, but like to just kind of. I feel like a better retaliation is just like. A humoristic thing where it's like, even though this is something that is very important to me and my identity, it doesn't have to be something that has to be talked about too seriously. It can be talked about just like any other thing. And I kind of wanted to, I think that's kind of the message I was putting out there, where it's like, just kind of be as yourself, be super blunt. But people can make really beautiful metaphors about stuff like that too, and that's 100% all right as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think what stands. I really like art that does, that gets blunt like that, and I think that's what stood out to me about that song. Of, you're blunt and you're very, and you're saying things that a lot of people might consider taboo there, but I think you're also. You have this line of, let's go out into the city, dance around the street like idiots. You do capture kind of this complexity and this, feeling of romance and love within that very blunt, kind of no holds barred.
Yeah.
So,
I think that was kind of the idea. I started out with like a really hypersexual line and then just kind of turn it into a thing that's like more legitimate. And it's like, this isn't just like a spur of the moment lust or whatever. It's like something that can be built on. And like I think I remember the way I thought about it was like, I can't even remember, but I remember like each verse I thought of like this person is very young and kind of experiencing love for the first time in this way. And then like the middle verse is kind of like, it's still a lot of fun, and there's like a lot of sexuality and like really excited love kind of going into it. But by the end, it's much more like, I wouldn't say adult, because the song does overall have like a fun vibe to it, but I feel like it's almost like kind of taking like the first like really blunt statement and just kind of rolling with it and just like expanding on like this can just keep going. It's not just this one thing. It's like love can be experienced in many ways, and it can evolve, and sort of it can be very fun, but it can also be very serious, like home life, marriage, stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. No, yeah, I love that. I was, I totally see that. You know, I have the lyrics open right in front of me, and I totally see that. I think that's really amazing.
Thank you.
That's all I have for questions. You know, we went track by track through that EP, and talked about some other stuff. But that's pretty much all I have for questions. Anything else you want to
add? Nothing I can think of. It was fun to do. Thank you so much for calling, having me.
No, I really appreciate this. I love someone who's able to kind of dig into music, and you certainly give music a good face, putting stuff like this out, and kind of having that kind of philosophy that you do. This is the kind of music I love to kind of put a spotlight on.
Thank you so much.
That will do it for our interview with Cam Pileski of Ice Cream Orphan, but we are not quite done with this podcast yet. We'll be circling back to our new segment where we check back in with bands that have previously appeared on the podcast to keep you up to date with what they've been doing. We're checking in with 3 Pounds of Pure Culture family right now. On tap today, it's Circus Trees, who we recently spotlighted a few episodes ago. State of the Union, all the way back from episode 1, and the rapidly growing pop-punk group Planet Mercury. We start, though, with Circus Trees. They had been shredding the live circuit of this area for roughly a year, but in terms of public releases, lacked anything more than a pair of singles. That changed February 15th when they finally dropped an EP. It's called Sakura and features some absolutely shredding songs, but carries a catch. Up until just about a week or 2 ago, it was only available on vinyl. They'd been selling copies at shows. Absolutely, yeah. They've been selling copies at shows and had dropped a few copies off at various record stores, but this vinyl was hard to get your hands on. They are a young band, got their stuff on vinyl, so applause to them.
That's crazy. Okay, yeah.
And I had the chance to review that EP for a music publication I write for up in Lowell. It is a great EP. Finally now it is on Bandcamp and Spotify, so that is good. Definitely encourage all of you guys to check out Sakura by Circus Trees. Again, just a fantastic fantastic EP. These guys are fantastic, brilliant. Brilliant musicians in this Central Massachusetts scene. Regardless of whether or not of how quickly that content was able to be picked up by Circus Trees fans, our next band got its start in an era where vinyl was king. But unlike Circus Trees, they had their content up on Bandcamp and Spotify right away. It's Boston punk icon State of the Union, and they just dropped an album entitled Panaflex Blue. Their album is proof of State of the Union's punk's chops and promising argument that as they owned their corner of the 90s Boston scene, they still deserve formidable respect in these late 2010s. Again, that one is entitled Panaflex Blue. They dropped their music on streaming platforms last month, and again, just some rock solid, old school 80s, 90s style punk from a band that is not going anywhere anytime soon. And lastly, we have Planet Mercury, arguably one of the most aggressively touring bands in the Central Mass pop-punk scene right now. These guys just dropped a highly anticipated follow-up EP to last year's debut. This one is called None in a Million, and it certainly signals a bit of a poppier shift in the band's sound. It still, though, maintains that breakneck Blink-182, Sum 41 style cadence that had dominated their music up until now. All Around is just a solid EP, getting some solid buzz right now, especially on social media. It's available on Bandcamp, Spotify, and a variety of other streaming services, so I do encourage all you guys to check it out. The guys in Planet Mercury are a great group of people. They worked really well with us when we did the spotlight on them, and they put out some good music. Nevertheless, though, we've talked a lot about a lot of great bands on this podcast, and they are all doing great work in their scenes, so we'll be checking back in with many more of them, including, hopefully, Ice Cream Orphan in future episodes. But for now, this will be the end of this segment of 3 Pounds of New Music, and by extension, this episode of 3 Pounds of Pure Culture. Big thanks to Ice Cream Orphan for letting me use their music, and to Cam Pulaski for speaking with me for this episode. Once again, you can hear Ice Cream Orphan on Bandcamp, Spotify, and a variety of other music streaming services. They're also on Facebook, Instagram, and do shows regularly throughout southern New England. For all of us, though, I've been Dakota Antelman. This has been 3 Pounds of Pure Culture. Thanks for watching.